Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. In today's show, I'm delighted to be joined by Colin Crabbe. Colin is a Formula One team owner, a racing driver, and an eminent restorer and dealer of historic classic racing cars. In his book, The Thrill of the Chase, Colin takes us on an exciting journey right through from his childhood, then as captain in the Scots Guards, his motor racing career, and a life tracking down classic racing cars throughout the world. The book is full of fantastic stories, some of which Colin will tell us about today. I've just finished reading the book. It's a really, really good book with lots of fantastic stories. Hello and welcome to the show, Colin.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Well, the book is a storybook, and it's a very truthful book. And I only really got sued by one person because he didn't like what I said about it. But when you're writing a book about your life, and in my case, the best part of 500 old cars collected from all over the world, it's very difficult to get your facts 100% right. And in this case, in one case, I got it wrong, and he threatened to sue me. So the book, sadly out of print, was hidden, large quantities of them, all over Great Britain, in case there was a seizure order on them. Luckily that never came to it, and the man backed off, and it was all apologies and things. It shows you how jolly careful you've got to be when you write anything.
I bet you do, Colin, yeah. So, Colin, before we talk about your life with cars, could you just please tell us a little bit about your early life, your family, etc.?
We come from a whiskey distilling family.
Yeah.
And we can go back to 1750-ish.
Wow.
To the age, and then it's all blank. We were based in, naturally, not surprisingly, in Scotland, and in Dumfries. In fact, I've still got some of the coloured panes of glass from the original house, which was pulled down, built in 1855 and pulled down a bit over 100 years later. The distillery was in Leith, and I went to look at it the other day, and it's still called Crabbe's. So that was what the name of the whiskey was.
Yeah.
There was only two types of Crabbe in my day. There was good Crabbe and rather posh Crabbe. Posh being considerably more expensive. So I've always drunk it. I won't now, because of course the new people who own it are producing a sort of whiskey and ginger beer mixed and things like this. Yeah. Yeah. Still have the nerve to call it Crabbe. I find it sad, but anyway, that was part of my early life and probably gave me the capital to do what I have enjoyed doing for the last 75 years.
Yeah. And then you went to university?
I went to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Not for very long, but I went there to learn a bit about geology and archaeology, which was my sort of specialised subject. Prior to that, I'd gone to school in Yorkshire, which I loved to this day. I hated school, but I love Yorkshire. That was really where I got one of my great interests, which was going out one day on the moors and finding an absolutely perfect arrowhead, Neolithic. One thing led to another, and I've got now a jolly good collection of working flints from the Mesolithic age. So that was really how it all got going.
Yeah, and then you joined you went into the army.
I did indeed. I suppose where we could be classified as a military family. My grandfather, who I never knew, fought in Natal during the Boer War. Yeah. My father had a very good military career and was one of the very first people to cross into Germany in 1945. Oh, wow. I mean, to the extent I've actually got all the original documents, with one marvellous sort of, two marvellous words in red, called Get Hitler. And I think it's dated the 5th of May, 45.
Yeah, wow.
Hitler was dead, just about dead by then.
So these were the instructions for the army to get Hitler?
Those were I mean, it was more long-winded, but that was the general, that had been written in red. I found a lot of maps and things too, not very long ago, which I gave back to the Scots Guards, which was my regiment, and rather fun maps with sort of machine gun positions, dead German. It was all sort of, it was absolutely detailed, and this was perhaps 3 weeks earlier, going through the lowlands, going through the Netherlands on the way to Germany. Anyway, I joined Scots Guards. I suppose I went through the school corps, which we all did, and hated again. Then I joined the Scots Guards. And I wasn't really mad keen on going in, but my father reckoned I should. So really not to annoy him, I went in, entered quite successfully, and I enjoyed 3 years of not doing very serious soldiering. We didn't do any fighting, which to me was rather important if you go into the army. Neither did I move out of England, which I thought was even sadder. I'd gone, one going to the army in those days, there were places you could go to Malaya, as it was then, or you could go to Canada, you could go to East Africa. There were a whole lot of places you could go to.
But you had to stay in England.
But I just stayed at Queen Elizabeth's barracks at Purbright. So I did have one little story about that time, as I was already involved in buying old cars, and they were dirt cheap. And I had a 1952 Lagonda convertible, exactly the same as the Duke of Edinburgh had. Probably he had his new, I suspect. And I'd gone up to London to go and visit with my father, to go and look at a new car, because my father was mad on cars.
So do you think it was your father's influence that got you interested in cars?
I think largely I took it over from him.
Yeah.
I remember being sort of going down, I think, called the Ash Strait in Aberdeen, and we got 100 out of his Bristol, which was going some, I'll tell you. We expected the thing to explode. But no, it was fun.
A Lagonda?
I had a Lagonda. And the Lagonda was had been to this party at a car dealership in London with my dear old dad. And I no doubt I was pissed. But on the way back to Purbright, I'd forgotten about a roundabout, which I hit at 40 miles an hour.
Ah. And
I can remember this because there was a dog track underneath it. It must have been Sunbury-on-Thames, somewhere like that, I think. And you could see underneath the car, you could see where the dogs used to run. Well, of course, that caused immense excitement with the police. But as it so happened, I was breathalyzed and I was clear. And then I realized what had happened was the police then said, "Oh, you're based at Purbright, come and give you a lift there." Oh, I said, "Thank you very much indeed. Any time." And I'd hit a roundabout, which in fact 3 police forces, if you like, had a third of it in their jurisdiction.
Oh, right.
So they came to see what was going on, and they were very nice to me, which is very rare because they're not normally very nice to me. But no, that was also, I think, my first motor crash.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, I've had dozens of cars. My father obviously influenced me. When I was 21, I was given a Mini. Very much, it was a lovely Mini, divine Mini. It was also the first year of production.
So this would be...
1970 or 71, I think.
Right.
Or 60
or 61, yeah.
61, by
yeah.
Roddy. And it was Cooper-esque, or it was Coopered. It was Mr. Alexander Engineering had put a very demon engine in.
So for listeners that don't know a lot about cars and Cooper's is the sports version?
Oh, and how? This car had been sent specially to Cooper's for me. How fast it is by modern standards, one wouldn't sort of think about it. But it was very fast. One of the guards I had to do later on was Windsor Castle, out of Purbright, where the battalion was stationed at the time. I mean, I used to get it down to a pretty good 12, 13 minutes to Windsor, which was breaking every rule in the book, I think.
We won't ask what.
But he taught me to drive. And he taught me to drive well, and he taught me to drive fast and safely. Yeah. And it's a story in the book, and I shan't go into it here, where I actually saw a ghost. You come across that bit yet?
You saw a ghost? I think I did, yes.
I saw a ghost. I went to stay with a friend of mine in Scotland, in the Mini. I first of all did spin the Mini, I remember that, and landed up facing a cow, which was staying with a friend of mine in Ayrshire. And it was a wonderfully spooky castle. It had an oubliette, which for those not in the know is a sort of bottle-shaped dungeon where you fed scraps at the end of a rope. Anyway, I enjoyed that. I had a lovely time there. And my friend, they lived there for hundreds of years, and said, "Don't be worried if we hear footsteps tonight." Well, I sort of expected somebody going to see your mother, isn't it? And ho, ho. And he said, no. I tell you, it's King James.
Really?
And King James comes and sees Mummy every few weeks, and this is the time when he comes. Well, I tell you, I love ghosts. And I've got some pretty ghostly stories I've had in the past. That was the nearest I've ever been to a ghost. Coming back to the castle one night, I saw a little bearded figure standing, looking out of a turret window. So I said at dinner, "Who's been dressing up? Who put a beard on?" Looked out of the window, and they all looked absolutely blank. And the window I looked at had been blocked off 100 years ago.
That's strange, isn't it?
So that is fact.
Yeah.
As long as you keep an eye on me, I'd be all right.
So when you were in the army and you'd started this sort of interest in cars, and you were starting to buy at that time, weren't you?
I started to buy really before then. I started to buy when I was at Edinburgh. And then you could buy a vintage Austin 7 for about a fiver. So I was buying little cars, Austins and things.
Yeah.
And, as one does when you start collecting. And in those days, everything was dirt cheap, which is a very different story as to today. Anyway, my army career came to an end after 3 years, and I'd met up with a nice chap, and I said, "Well, you and I ought to start a garage together." And he said, "Okay, you pay for it, and I'll help you." That sort of attitude.
Yeah.
At which point, I went to Australia. A girlfriend of mine's parents said, "Would I like to go to Australia with them?" Which was wonderful. I did. And I spent 3 months in Australia, actually staying at a government house in Canberra, which was extremely comfortable and rather fun. And after that, I bought a car, not rented a car, and I think it was a Ford Consul or something. It was a Ford made in Australia.
Yep.
They looked like the ones here, but they were a bit different. And I, by train and luck, found my way to Alice Springs. A lovely time looking at all the kangaroos and all things, wildlife. I'd go back and do that. I haven't done, nor will I now, but there was a lot I missed out on. And without the girlfriend, I wasn't allowed to take her.
Too far?
No, I think the parents had their eye on me.
Oh, I see.
Probably very rather mischievous. And ended up in Brisbane, spent 2 days. I went to Green Island, a lovely tropical island, lovely swimming, pretty girls. I mean, it was absolutely what was perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Take the train back to Sydney, which was overnight, and I went in. There was a sleeper with a sort of anti-mosquito net over it. So I went to bed, got in a sleeper, and within 5 minutes I let out a squawk, the likes of which you've never heard. Because I looked up, I had the light on, and there was an enormous spider about 6 inches from my nose. So I know what Australian spiders are, they can kill you.
It's interesting, isn't it? I've been to Australia, and I went about 6 years ago, and the whole wildlife just sounds different, doesn't it, because of all the different animals and creatures and insects.
Divine little baby kangaroos and what are those little bears called? I can't remember. What are the things that cling to trees?
Oh, what, koala bears? Yeah. So when you came back from Australia, that's the time you decided to start Antique Automobiles, was it?
Yes. It was while I was in Australia, I had that idea that I didn't quite want to start a business. I had no particular business. But then I was doing I was going to do vintage racing. I had a vintage racing.
Oh, so you'd started racing by then?
Yeah, but I hadn't actually done it.
Right.
I heard on the grapevine that post-war cars were now being accepted by the Vintage Club over here. By that I mean a Maserati 250F, a Ferrari, Formula One car, things which had never been allowed before. So what should I do? I go and find a 250F Maserati in Melbourne. So I buy it. £1,000, that really did clip.
I was going to say £1,000 in the early 60s, that was a lot of money.
It's worth probably $250,000 now.
Wow.
And I bought that. It was a car driven by the Australian champion Stan Jones, and he'd bought it from Stirling Moss. So we had lots of lovely pictures of the car with Moss driving it. And it had won the Australian Grand Prix on one occasion. On the next time, it had gone into a tree at the start. It's not good driving. So anyway, I arranged that to come back. And then we set up this company called Antique Automobiles, which...
So this was back in England, was it?
This was back in England. Yeah. I had a little team of people which I built up over the next few years, really. And I was doing what other people did at the time, which was a small workshop, restored a car, charged so much an hour for other people. And that went on during the 1960s, I suppose. So having returned from Australia, I got hold of my friend Roger, and we went out and wondered where on earth we were going to start a business. And here was I in Lincolnshire, Roger in Lincolnshire, and I lived in Aberdeenshire. So there was kind of a problem in how one was going to get to and fro. And the deal I did was all typical Crabbe deal, that he would run it while I went to Aberdeenshire to shoot grouse.
Sounds like a fair exchange.
I thought it was a very fair exchange. That worked about a year. Then he got bored, I got bored. We weren't making any money. We survived, that's about all. Funnily enough, we landed an extraordinary contract to restore cars for Mercedes-Benz.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure how we got it, but we got it. And which meant we always had a car. Yeah. And one car is restored, a Mercedes man to come out and check it out, back it go, and another one would come the following week. So that was very good. So anyway, Antique Automobiles carried on, And I sold the company in 1983. I said I folded it. I didn't actually sell it to anybody, I kept it. But I just closed the garage doors, and we didn't do any more restorations. I got totally disillusioned with restoring cars. There were dozens of people starting little companies doing it, and you quite simply couldn't meet their prices, employing people. I was very lucky because I used to, half my staff would come from BRM, of course being just up the road in Bourne. Yeah. So I had very good mechanics because they were very badly paid, so I just gave them another 5 shillings an hour, and I got Cyril Atkins, head mechanic, came to me, and he became my head mechanic for a number of years. So anyway, there we are in the early 70s. What am I going to do? Well, I thought I'd go to America. Go and have a look at America. I like America. Went to America, found a few pretty good racing cars. I was really going to specialise in racing cars. And then I came back to England, and I decided South America was the place to go. And I was proved absolutely right, because I had a set of photographs of a Maserati and a Ferrari sort of in the jungle. Yeah. So I thought, work that out, because they were quite current cars. And you wonder, when a car's life is over, the season's over, and then it would probably be bought by some third world country who were going to run it in their own race, which is exactly what happened. They either went to Argentina or they went to Australia. They went to the sort of southern hemisphere. And so I went there. I spent quite a long time in Argentina, exploring more than playing with cars.
I mean, Colin, just to interrupt a second, the book obviously tells a lot of stories about some of the cars that you found. And this is in the days before the internet. How did you find out about these cars?
Well, really by chatting people up and finding ancient mechanics and people who could be involved with the cars.
Just networking generally?
It was just pure networking. Yeah. And, networking worked unbelievably well in the end.
You found some really interesting finds in Argentina.
Yes, my first visit to Argentina, which was 1976, was very interesting because, in fact, we arrived roughly normally. I did wonder why there were so many people carrying machine guns around. I thought it was a bit wild country, and there were police vans with sirens going. Because I arrived in the middle of a revolution, which nobody told me
That's
about.
Not the best timing, is it, Colin?
I was to do it again somewhere else, too. Where the story gets very twisted and rather nasty, actually. We might leave that bit out. But those were the days when the Argentines were caught throwing their prisoners out of aeroplanes. One way of getting rid of them. Bought cars in Argentina, bought probably a dozen cars in Argentina. And I bought a number of little baby Bugattis, which are also shown in the book. Yeah. And they went back to the workshop, got tarted up and got sold
So
on.
the cars that you bought, they were then shipped back to the UK, or back into the UK?
Shipped straight back to Baston and stripped.
Yeah.
Or sold complete. I mean, it's rather depending where you're going to make your most money. Did Matey want to restore it himself, or did he want me to restore it, or did he want somebody else to restore it, and the price was adjusted accordingly?
And how long would it take, say, I suppose it varies by car, but roughly how long would it take to restore a car?
The sort of cars we had, it could take ages, because you get stuck by one piece that you can't get. You have to fabricate.
So it could be a year or so?
Yeah, it could be, actually.
Long time.
I think we had maximum, we were about 20 people. We had a top machinist. All the equipment I bought was absolute top notch. The latest, whatever it was. And so we had no excuse not of producing secondary work, and we didn't.
No.
That's the story of Mercedes coming on board.
So you had the best mechanics, the best equipment, and you gradually built your reputation up.
Then I got twitched. I got excited with motor racing, and as red road cars had gone by, I'd bought a GTB Ferrari, which was a very good car, and then I bought a GTO for 800 quid, now worth millions. My wife Fiona said, "This is the most awful car you've ever bought," because it sort of, you had to put full left lock to turn right sort of thing. It was really a old wreck. But still worth a great deal of money today, a huge amount of money. And anyway, that I bought two of those. Both. I mean, I'm very much the agent. I didn't keep anything.
Did you have any issues in terms of, making sure that they were authentic cars?
Oh, I know an authentic car when it's not. And you talk about forgeries, because there are a lot of forgeries around today, because it's worth forging a car because they're so valuable. It wasn't worth it in those days. And I might just go forward a few years. I sold one car to a German. And he sold it on to somebody else. And then the German bought it back, thinking it was worth £1 million. In fact, it was still worth about £200, which is what I'd paid for it. But I'd bought it in the United States early on in my career, I suppose around about 1970. Paid very little for it, and got a letter from Alfa Romeo to say this is a fake. That always helped. I still have it, the letter. And of course, that's all you needed, just sort of show it to people, and then life proceeds. It was seen at Goodwood last year going very badly. I was pleased to see.
And so how do is it all to do with the chassis number? Because I guess that could be forged as well.
Oh, you've got chassis numbers. You can see what old numbers were stuck on. You had to be very careful whether there'd be new numbers hammered on. Yeah. I think we were very good. I don't actually think I had a single fake car in all the years. I had an awful lot of cars. I say I had over 100. I probably did. I don't know how many.
What you were doing at the time was quite unique.
Not doing what I was doing, which was exploring.
Yeah.
Which is what I love doing.
Yeah.
Going, meeting Indians, going down jungle paths.
Wow.
Going to the Iguazu Falls. Yeah. Flying over the Andes.
So the exciting part for you was going to the places and meeting the people?
Yeah, largely.
Yeah.
And I think my name went round and then people started offering me things, and that's really how the South American side worked.
Yeah. Must have been very exciting.
There were moments when it was extremely exciting. And I can think of various extremely exciting moments, which probably out of sync. But probably the most exciting thing I ever did was fly on Concorde.
Oh, wow.
Which I was to do several times. Yeah. You might ask how I got an enormous bottom like mine on the seat, because they were pretty tight. But I've just never forgotten it. It was just spectacular stuff. Later on, I went to Cuba. This is no racing. This is long after the racing hour. And I went to Cuba and I found 3 D-type Jaguars.
Sorry, D-type?
D-type.
D-type,
Le Mans type.
Yeah.
And I had a sort of notion they'd be there. They were there once upon a time. And Andrew White, I think it was, who wrote the penultimate book on Jaguars, he came to see me and we had a long talk and we reckoned there could be a D-type out there. Anyway, so I applied for a visa to go to Cuba in 1980. Well, not many people go to Cuba then. It was total shut. No, there weren't tourists, there were none. 9 months later, I get a telephone call from the Cuban embassy please come and have your passport stamped. 9 months. So I was on the first available train from Peterborough and had the passport stamped. I mean, it's all quite exciting. You are leaving on Thursday. And this was Monday.
Oh, right. What, they decided when you could go?
Oh, yeah, no, that was all decided.
Yeah.
It was an extraordinary setup. And I bought a load of cars. They air freighted the whole bloody lot back.
No issues getting stuff back?
No issues. I thought there would be tremendous issues, but there weren't. There were no problems at all, because nobody had ever tried it before.
How were you perceived when you came into Cuba, landed at the airport? How did that feel?
I think they just accepted me for what I was. I had a visa, and that was good enough for them. I mean, we were put up in a hotel, no charge.
No charge?
It was called Havana Libre, the Free Havana. In fact, I think it was a Holiday Inn or something in its previous life. Went there, met an absolutely charming Australian who was exporting cigars. And we got talking, and I said, I think we better carry on our talking in the bedroom, because there were people taking interest in us. So up we went to my bedroom, where we consumed a bottle of rum, and said good night to him. We told each other filthy stories, because I reckoned we'd probably be somebody listening in.
Yeah.
And they were, because the following morning I came out of my bedroom, and there was a little man in a peaked hat waiting outside. Good morning, he said to me. Oh, but we love your stories, Mr. Crabbe. Oh, you are a wonderful storyteller. Have a good breakfast.
And did they leave you alone after that?
Oh, yes, no trouble at all.
That was good tactic then, wasn't it?
I wasn't expecting it. That was the only thing I could think of saying.
And how long did you stay in Cuba for?
I had several trips to Cuba.
Yeah.
Probably 4. My last trip to Cuba was quite interesting. We're now moving into. I'm racing at the same time, so I've got to sort of juggle my motor racing and my trips to Cuba.
Yeah.
Restorations and various other things that I was getting up to. The chap I was dealing with, who was obviously on the export sales side of things, out there, he ran. He was a very nice man. He used to take me out to lunch, at Lobster. And I saw on his desk, to my utter horror, several magazines as my advertisements. Not for £100, but for £10,000 sort of thing. And he said, "You're making good money out of me, Mr. Crabbe." I said, "What else do you do here?" I said, "You make cigars, don't you?" "Yes," he said. "Why don't we do a deal on cigars?" Well, the end of that conversation was 10,000 cigars.
But successfully diverted away from what you would do.
Never mentioned again. And I became everybody's best friend when I came back to England. I was the man with the cigars. And I was going to set up a company, but it never actually came to fruition for various reasons I will tell you about. It was Captain Crabbe Cigars. Where the captain came from, I'm not quite sure, but it seemed to rhyme quite well.
It sounds authentic.
It did. I rather agree with you. And I was going to a great friend of mine who was at school with me, who was number one in Scotland at a drink shop there. I've forgotten what it's called, the drink shop. He was there, and he got fired. I think he didn't get fired because he was much too good for that. I think they were overstaffed and laid him off, and he was a much too nice a man. He was at Ampleforth with me, which, as you know, is a church school, and he got into terrible trouble for he became a priest.
Yeah.
And then he got into terrible trouble for hitting a novice over the head with a candlestick, and so he had to leave the church. And he was available.
Yeah.
I thought, and I said, "Henry, why don't you come and run this company for me?" And we laughed, and he talked and talked and talked. And he never came back to me. Meanwhile, he got himself killed.
Oh dear.
he got run over, or there was a head-on crash somewhere. So that was one, if you like, Captain Crabbe's cigars was stillborn. But the profit in those cigars was even more than the motor cars.
Was it?
I mean, a decent cigar in Cuba costing £1 in Cuba, you'd buy it for 15 over here.
Wow.
The markup was simply bliss.
Did you end up giving them all away in the end?
I gave them all away. Kept a box myself and my mates, and that was about it.
Colin, so while you were buying and selling these cars, at the same time, you were actually racing cars as well, weren't you?
I was competing in them where possible.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit how you got into racing?
Well, I got into racing, I suppose, going back to my student days in Edinburgh, where I drove a rather nasty TR3 at Charter Hall, which is the Scottish circuit. Actually, to motor racing, I wasn't particularly interested in other people motor racing. But as it turned out, I was quite good at running people and sort of running a team, which is what I did eventually. While I was in Kenya, I got 2 telephone messages, or wire messages, or whatever they were in those days. One told me that my friend, Jim Clark, had been killed at Hockenheim, and the other was that a GP Mercedes, a Grand Prix Mercedes, a 6-litre one, had been found in East Germany, which again was no-go territory. And was I interested? You bet your life I was interested. So I got on the first available flight. So it's only I could do via Ethiopia.
Via Ethiopia?
I went to Ethiopia and got to Eritrea as the next stop, where I found 3 bloody good cars. All countries I didn't expect to find anything. I found a Ferrari racing car, and I found a pre-war Alfa and a pre-war Maserati. The Ferrari and the Maserati looked brand new. 1956, 1936. Extraordinary, I found them. Then, quite recently, I found a picture of all these cars in a race in Asmara.
Oh, wow. So they're still around?
Well, they are now, because they're sold.
Yeah.
So I bought all these cars, but brought them back. And then I went to Berlin, had long talk discussions with I had a German who was my agent in Germany, and he'd actually tipped me off about this Mercedes. So, Checkpoint Charlie, here we come.
Oh, yeah.
So, slightly nervously, I went through Checkpoint Charlie, which was a very simple operation, really.
Yeah.
And they put mirrors under your car so you weren't. And there was a Mercedes, and there was its engine sitting beside it. So I bought the car, sold it to a nameless friend of mine, or sold a share to a nameless friend of mine for £10,000. Well, you may have noticed the price had gone up a bit. And he thought he'd overpaid for it and got out of it. Well, I think today... That
so you'd agreed the sale of it, and he pulled out?
He pulled out.
Yeah.
I didn't care, particularly, because I got so excited with this Mercedes, which I rebuilt here in Baston.
Yeah.
And famous pictures of me driving up the Fen Road here.
I think you've got 1 or 2 of those in the book, haven't you, Colin?
Yeah, on trade plates.
Yeah.
And the first 2 times nothing happened. It gave out a dull fart. And so we had to turn around and come back again. Had another go. It gave out a double fart. And I thought, how are we going to get this bloody thing going? And the next time we retimed it, we found we had a camshaft in the wrong position. And I got a serious fright, because it got 500 horsepower there.
Wow.
I just avoided the van.
That must have been scary.
I'm so excited, I can't tell you. And of course, the night when we had to run it in. So I drove it on all the back roads around here, on trade plates, highly illegally. And racing, I'd entered the Premier vintage race. Well, as I'd never driven the car before, the car had never been driven in a race before, I was a bit nervous and a bit brave. So I took it to Alton Park, and I entered the Seaman Trophy race, which I won very easily. I think this car was about 50% faster than anything else. Wonderful road holding, wonderful brakes. You couldn't fault it.
Colin, while we're talking, I've just been looking up at a magnificent picture of a racing car, or it's a painting, shall I say? And it looks as though it's ever so good.
In the pouring rain.
Yeah, and you can see the rain there, and that's you driving, is it, Colin?
I am.
Yeah.
I mean, one wet day, you also probably can't tell, but the diameter of the rear wheels are 25-inch.
And that's the car we've just been referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, sorry, could you repeat what that car was?
It's a W125 Mercedes.
Yeah.
It was, they went through a series of producing racing cars after 1935. And the first time they got it right was 1937 with that car.
Yeah.
Designed by a German married to an English girl. And he was their sort of best designer ever. They were extremely reliable.
Yeah.
A sort of modified one did over 200 miles an hour on the Autobahn, timed. And it never gave me a moment. I had a moment of horror that it was going to blow up on me. And having won the race, instead of stopping and getting my trophy, I parked it. And people said, why have you parked it there? Oh, I said, it's getting a bit hot. I was terrified it was going to explode.
Yeah, with you in it.
With me in it.
Yeah.
But no.
It's a beautiful looking car, Colin.
Never missed a beat in all the years I had it.
It's a beautiful looking car.
I was never beaten.
No.
It beat Ferraris, it beat much later cars. And I sold it to, ironically, the man who was going to come in with me originally and buy it. And all I can say is it sold for an enormous sum of money.
Mm. So was that your favourite car to race?
That
Colin?
was the all-time favourite car to race. I didn't race very much. I'd sold it. I only raced it for 3 years. Then I sold it. And then the next owner very nearly totaled it. He didn't have a crash. He went, do you know Monte Carlo?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Did you know the tunnel?
Yeah.
He spun it in the tunnel.
How did he manage that?
Well, by being a silly sod. But he just gave it too much pet willy.
Yeah.
But anyway, it has never been crashed. It then went to Japan. That's sort of very sad. To come back here, it was bought by Bernie Eccleston, who, as you know, was a sort of head man in Formula One. Yeah. And he sold it to the chap who's got it at the moment, who's a German. I believe very, very nice. He's never contacted me.
So it's gone back to Germany?
Back in Germany.
It's quite amazing, Colin, how you remember the detail of these cars, but not only that, you actually know now where they are. After all, they must really leave an impression with you.
Well, I think certain cars do leave an impression on me.
Yeah.
But it's a funny old world. I got a telephone call last week from a Czech who wanted to come and see me. So I said, well, you can come and see me if you want. Bring some beer, I said. So these two Czechs arrived. I think with a mammoth collection of cars. And they gave me a dozen bottles of the Pilsner. And he'd bought one of the cars I'd bought originally in North Africa, in Asmara.
Wow.
He wanted, I think, proof that I'd been the owner.
Yes. Oh, right.
Very nice couple.
Yeah.
I had two Mercedes. I found one Mercedes in California. It must have been California, which had no engine. But I bought it because all the bits fitted this. The brake drums.
All right.
Would fit to go straight on. So all the bits I was missing came off this second chassis and went straight onto that. And the second chassis I sold quite a lot of money because prices gone edged up a bit.
In this first episode, we're going to have more episodes with Colin. We've covered some of Colin's career in the buying and selling of antique automobiles, which is something obviously very specialist. And in the next episode, we shall carry on with that, but we'll also be talking a bit more about Colin's racing career. So, Colin, until next time, it's been great talking to you. And we'll put this episode out and then we'll follow on with another one. So thanks ever so much for coming on the show.
It's been an enormous pleasure, and thank you very much for taking the time and bother to come and see me.
Well, it's great, and I'm looking forward to next time. Thanks very much, Colin.
So am I.
Thank you. Bye-bye. You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I would be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.